once again. Thank you all for joining us. This is Nuance. I'm Mike Scala, and we'll be speaking about the controversy regarding the boxing match at the Paris Olympics. Of course, I'm joined by our co-host, Jay Carter, also known as Timid, the hip-hop artist in the chair of BLM Tokyo. What's going on, Jay?
Good, man. Not too bad. So nothing really out of the ordinary or exciting happening this way. I did sit down and watched the interview with the Math Hoffa interview with Canibus. And I just saw first, I do like the clips, the 10-minute clips,
Mhm.
but then it started to get so interesting. I ended up watching probably the whole thing.
Okay.
Um, and so yeah, I found it really interesting because cannabis is like one of those big what if stories in hip hop.
I
And
had
there was
that thought recently too, and there are a lot of people in my age group, maybe even a little bit older, who will still name Cannabis as one of their top MCs of all time. He at
right,
For a certain time, right? He was that guy that everyone was talking about, like he was going to be the next big star, and it never
right.
really panned out that way.
Yeah, and we never got a lot about his side. And so, on the Hoffa show, like they let him talk and they let him do his, and his perspective was a little bit more clear in that. Like he came off more like they were saying like, you were kind of scary to people in the industry at that time because of your skills and the ferocity you came with. So people are going to be sizing you up. Plus, that's going to have the beefs and the issues there. And his perspective is like, I just wanted to rhyme with you guys. I just wanted to be in there, flex my skill like everybody else was doing. He didn't care much about like being taking someone else down. It was more like I want to be a part of, right? But he's coming in with these it'd be like Michael Jordan going to like the local court and he just wants to play and everyone's like, "Oh, this is Michael Jordan. Oh my God." And then they're freaking out. You know what I mean? But he's like, "I just want to play ball."
Well, did they talk about the issue of Cannabis not really creating songs? I mean, if you're trying to blow up
Yes.
beyond the mixtape
Yes.
level, right? If you want to get
Yes.
commercial, if you want to be a big star in music beyond
Yes.
just, oh, he's got rap skills, you got to make
Yep.
songs. And I know of at least one Cannabis album where he just recorded a bunch of acapella verses, sent
Yeah.
them to a producer, and was like, now I'll just put them together. But they're interchangeable. Verse one and verse three could be swapped. There will be no discernible difference. He's not really telling stories and he's not putting coherent songs together.
Right. No, they talked about that at length actually. Um, and he realizes that was a an issue, and Mecca definitely brought it up with him. Math was like, um, he was like, "Ah, I don't believe that. That's this," but because he tried to point out a milli, but that's like one after Lil Wayne is like super big, and
Right.
but
And his whole
yeah,
career wasn't him just rapping like that. I mean, you could
right,
do things like that, and that's what makes it stand out. They're like, oh, look at this. He's just
right,
rapping, he's just going in. But you
right.
got to have the body of work. You got to have the songs. You got to be versatile.
Right. And Cannabis was admitting that. It's like I don't yeah, I wasn't making those types of things. I'd go in and drop 50 bars on a verse.
Yeah.
And like that's that's dope for like the underground scene. That's dope for hip hop heads. That's
Right.
not gonna play on radio. That's
Right.
not something that they're looking for in licensing to TV and movies,
Right.
right? That's not something that you can do in a performance on TV because they've got certain times restrictions in between commercials, and you can't come on and do a performance of something that's like 100 bars,
There's a
right?
difference between making great music and being a great rapper. You could do
Right.
both, right? It's
Right.
not easy to do both. Not many people can do both well. What we strive for,
Right.
but there's a difference. Those are two different skill sets. And there are some
Right.
people, by the way, who are not great at rapping who do make great songs, and vice
Right.
versa, right? But the
And
ones
he
who are more
was
successful commercially tend to make
right.
top songs.
Right. And so he was, yeah, he recognized those things and talked about those things. And you could tell throughout the interview that like his experience in hip hop just kind of took a toll on him. Like he like emotionally, psychologically, and they didn't show it, but I think at the end, because Math Math wrapped up the whole interview by basically telling him, he's like, look, you're in that conversation of people who kind of changed the game a little bit in the way that people rhyme, where they look at rhyming and this type of thing. And he was giving him like his accolades, and he said, I appreciate you for your contribution to the culture. And then, Canibus came up, gave him a hug, took his hat off, and I guarantee you Canibus shed a tear in that thing. And it just seemed like something that he needed
Mm,
because of how much the culture had put him through.
yeah.
And part of it, he acknowledges some of his own decisions as well. But just from someone with the mentality, it's like, I want to be a part of. And then now you've got like all these beefs coming at you, and then your career doesn't take off. And then even after you leave, people are taking shots at you. And because he was saying, like, I just want to be a human. I don't want people to come and see me on the street and start talking to me about rap. Like, I do this, I do that. I'm a human. I want to talk about other things. And Mecca and Math are like, you can't understand. Like, when people see Jordan, they're gonna want to talk to him about Jordan, right?
Yeah. Hey,
You got
listen,
to understand that.
also, it should be a good thing. I mean, I would think you would
Well,
look at
he's not recognizing that.
you would look at it as a good thing if people still recognize you and want to talk to you about rap all those years later, given the fact, especially, he didn't get the commercial accolades. Maybe he didn't get to where he wanted to be,
Right,
but he's still recognized, right?
right,
You would think he would be proud of that.
right. I think it was a source of pain for him to some degree.
Right, right.
So it was really interesting in that regard. And a lot of it was them trying to convince, was not a lot of it, but some of it was them trying to convince him of how other people see him. Because like you said, when you think of, when people talk about top rappers, especially in a certain age range, they're like, Canibus is in that conversation, but he doesn't see that.
Mhm.
He doesn't see that people look at him like that.
Right.
And so one of the guys was saying, he's like, look, LL, that issue with LL was probably more about him seeing you coming, right? He's the top dog.
Yeah.
You're a monster. Him seeing you coming, right? The thing with Eminem is he was looked up to you, but was hurt that you didn't like reciprocate a certain way or miss whatever, but it's because he looked up to you,
How
right?
did you
And
always
then
feel about that LL Cool J tattoo controversy? How he dissed Canibus for the remark about taking the mic off his arm on 421.
well, I saw there was a recent actually LL is on Club Shay Shay right, recently. And he talked about that. And L said, and this is probably the first time I've heard L say it, he said that wasn't Cannabis's fault. He said I was an egomaniac and
Mm.
he ran into a maniac at that time. Like
Yeah, because
my mind was everything belongs to me. I
hearing
want it all.
hearing the Cannabis verse, I never thought it was intended as a shot against him.
No,
I don't think he was dissing L. I think, in fact,
no,
he was probably trying to pay homage to him, recognizing he had a
he
tattoo
was.
on his arm. Like, yo, let me use that microphone. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
a rap song, but it wasn't meant to be disrespectful, I don't think. And
right. And he
it
even
kind of struck me as odd that L took it that way.
right. And L now recognizes that. He's like, I was an egomaniac. Like I was unevolved, I hadn't matured, and I didn't take it that way. And so, and apparently, according to Canvas, they had even had a conversation before because I guess him and Mr. Cheeks were talking, and Mr. Cheeks is like, they were talking about most iconic tattoos in hip hop, and they were talking about L's tattoo. And so then when Canibus met L, he relayed some of that conversation. He's like, yeah, man, that's dope. Like, I would like to get something like that. So it
And he
was
did. I think he
right.
got a similar tattoo
Oh,
then.
did he? I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting. It was very interesting. And it seemed like it could have been something cathartic for Cannabis.
Right.
And he was, you know, I don't think I've ever heard him talk at length like that before.
Yeah, I think
So
I've seen Cannabis interviews before. Was he on with Math Hoffa? This kind of sounds familiar. You sure this isn't a repeat?
it is no, it's an old one. It's like a year ago.
Gotcha. Okay, then I might have seen that a year ago.
Yeah, it's like a year ago.
Sounds
It
familiar.
wasn't a recent one.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Interesting. I just got this event alert. You know what? I'm going to plug this event in a minute here. Before we do, I've been playing around with the TikTok algorithm, seeing what
Mm.
works, what doesn't, doing my research on this, how to feed the algorithm, try to find your audience on TikTok, right?
Mhm.
So I'm going to test my hypothesis here because it seems like, according to my most recent TikToks, that for whatever reason, the videos that are taken with my cell phone outperform the ones from Zoom. And
I
so,
think,
what I would like
yeah.
to do is test this out by setting up my cell phone and just taking video of us talking for a little bit and posting that as a TikTok during the week.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So, what were you gonna say? You think?
What people are have been talking about and speculating, um, and I don't think there's anything confirmed directly from TikTok, but they would prefer people to make videos in app with their in-app editor. So they're prioritizing that. And I saw like a someone recently talking about this in regards to creating using the CapCut editor, which is also owned by the same company that owns TikTok, which was there's a tight integration with them, and they're saying that CapCut seems to be even deprioritizing videos made with that because they
Mhm.
want people to create in-app as much as possible.
So the cell phone footage looks like it was made in app, even if it wasn't, right? Even if I import it into the app, it looks more
It's
natural.
possible, or it's looking at the metadata and seeing that, or something saying this was created here, so we don't want that.
I
But
did see that if you import videos from other platforms, it tends to deprioritize, especially if it has a watermark, like from
right,
YouTube or Zoom or what have
right,
you, right? TikTok discourages that, so that
right.
does make sense. I also wonder,
Instagram does too.
yeah, I also wonder if there's an organic element to it where people are responding now more to these types of videos for whatever reason, because they do say that the algorithm obviously rewards retention time, right? So the longer
Right.
it watches the video, the more people it's going to push it out to. And so maybe more people are watching these cell phone shot videos now. I don't know.
Well, it's more relatable, and that's kind of what been
True.
the trend. So prior to this, it was more the um heavily produced looking or with the variety of transitions, different types of transitions. That was
Yeah.
what was catching engagement. But people have now moved towards more of that direct to camera, more authentic, relatable type of
Yeah.
content. That
Yeah.
seems to be more the trend. That's what's happening right now. At
And
least that's what they're talking about now.
right. And trends tend to be cyclical because if
Right.
you do something against the grain, it stands out, right? So people, if they're scrolling through a bunch of videos that all look the same, they see something different, maybe that might catch their attention a little bit more. Oh, what is this? But then when that becomes a trend, right, then going the other
Right,
way
right.
better because you got to change it up. So, all right, let's try this out. So we like to have fun on here. So, who are your top five MCs of all time?
Top five. That's a tough question, man. Top five of all time? I
Yeah,
don't really have a list like that. I would say though, who would I put in that top five of all time?
you got to give us an answer. Come on.
Eminem is in there. M's clearly in there.
So this is no particular order.
No particular order. I don't have a particular order. M is clearly in there. I mean, people can
Just
hate
give me a list.
say
Come on, just give me five. Come on, boom, boom, boom. Five names. Let's go.
I don't have five names. M is definitely one. J maybe. Um, Common, Black Thought.
Mm.
Um, who else isn't? I can't think of who else of all time. Rakim?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So if I'm going top five, I'm going Nas, Gucci Rap, Rakim, Chuck D, and
Hmm.
KRS One, maybe.
Um, yeah.
What do you got?
Yeah.
What do you think? TikTok, tell me what you think.
Yeah, KRS and I think I don't know. That it's a tough one to think about.
Yeah. And I'm trying to take into account innovation, influence, right?
Right. Rakim is
Impact
you gotta
on
put
the
if you
culture.
take that into account, Rakim has to be in there because he changed the way everyone
Exactly.
rhymed.
Exactly. And I used to always put Rakim above Nas for that reason. I just think over time, Nas has more longevity and maybe done more career wise. But his style, I think, was very directly derived from Rakim's, as were many
Oh
of them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody there's I mean, if you talk about in hip hop, that's one of the markers, right? There's the before Rakim and the after Rakim
Right.
era for
Right.
MCs,
Right.
right? Because before Rakim, people were rhyming like Run DMC
DMC.
style.
That's right.
After Rakim, they were more
Like
fluid.
Rakim. Right.
Yeah,
And the difference is, for those who don't know, the way Rakim describes it is he was mostly influenced by jazz musicians. And so,
right.
whereas MCs prior to him were rhyming really more to the percussion, right? It was like,
Yes.
he wanted to be more melodic with his rhyming. And so that's why it's kind of
Yeah.
like a saxophone player might play, right? Like in and out. And that's how you get that more lyrical flow that evolved.
Right.
That right before it was very, 1, 2, 3, and his is more loose,
Right.
free flowing.
And I think if we're honest, there is another branch that happened later, um, with Lil Wayne. He influenced a lot of the younger artists that are out now can
Right,
trace their rhyming style to Lil Wayne, or their
right.
style and sound to Lil Wayne. Even though Wayne would probably also say, Rakim was an influence because he's I mean, dude's been around for a long time now. So like he's comes from that type of era. And so, but the younger guys look at him as like the all-time GOAT. And so, yeah,
Crazy to
so
think,
he's the
right? But also some of that garbage we hear now
is
is
attributed to Wayne.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so that's why I would struggle with putting him on my top five for that
I
reason.
wouldn't put him in my top five.
Yeah, but
But
I
if
see
we're
what you're
talking
saying.
about
We look at like these branch off points in history.
right, he is
Yeah,
definitely a branch off point. He is definitely a big influence on the way people rhymed after him.
right.
Yeah.
Shame, shame. Listen, I'm a New Yorker. I'm a New Yorker, and so I'm going to be biased in that regard, right? But
Right.
my New York hip hop, of
Yeah.
course, there's other stuff too. I like Kanye, I like Common, I like him, I like all these guys, Outkast. So it isn't
Right.
just a New York thing, but that it's where I'm from, and it's the roots of hip hop, and so I'm partial to it.
Right. Right. Right.
So, all right. Well, speaking of New York, I know we got a lot of local listeners.
New York.
Oh, by the way, you don't watch Club Random with Bill Maher, do you?
I do not.
Okay, because he had on the Hop Tua girl
She's just she was on Bill Maher. Why?
on the not on his show, not on his APO show, on his podcast that he does.
Oh, okay.
But she was. I just mentioned that because you were singing the song. She apparently she hears that song as "Wet Dream Tomato."
What?
The part about where dreams are made of, she hears it as "Wet Dream Tomato."
Ah,
If you
okay,
actually go and
okay.
listen to it now, you'll hear that. It's funny. Like once someone says that, then you can't unhear it.
Yeah. That's so crazy. Like she's basically can she's got a career now. She
She
can
has
jump
like 2
off.
million or like a ton of followers now. Like she's really parlayed.
It's
She has an agent. She's doing a bunch of podcasts, right? They're just really trying to get her out there. For what?
right.
I don't think she knows. That was interesting about that conversation. Not to go off on too much of a tangent, but she knew she was trying to get involved in show business and use this as that parlay. And so she was in the spot, right? The doors were opening for her, but I don't think she knew where exactly she wanted to go next. Like, is she gonna be an actor now? Is she gonna do her own show? Like, I don't think she really had that part down yet.
That's what it is. Like because this just came on so suddenly, right? It was unexpected and just from 1 minute it's just nothing and then boom, she's like everything. Um her what she I mean 2 million followers, this is already an income producing type of a following, right? Massive income producing following. This can be her career for life now if she plays it a certain way. I think the first thing that she should do is probably start a podcast or a YouTube channel, and because it's mainly people wanting to hear her, right?
Yeah,
Acting, it's going to take some time for her to get into. She can do some acting classes and stuff, but in the meantime, she needs to hit the social media. And she's
right.
doing good with these different appearances. But yeah, get a podcast, and start talking about it because they want to hear her talk. They want to hear the way
Yeah,
that she talks. They want to hear how she looks at things.
yeah.
And,
And in many ways, she comes off as a typical 21-year-old, but she does have a certain charm to her, and she doesn't seem like she's really unintelligent. I mean, yeah,
right, right, right.
she could do something. So
She's a little
anyway,
country girl and
yeah.
she's, yeah, good personality. She's fun. So yeah, she's gonna get a lot of.
All right,
She's,
so that's the segue we were looking for, Jay. I'm glad we.
uh-oh.
Speaking of fun and good personalities, I think, because you need a good personality to do this. This is the AO Jello wrestling event that they do every year in Rockaway. I saw the flyer for it. It's happening August 10th. I see you got questions already, Jay. 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. at Jerry Ray's Auto Sales lot. It's the Rockaway Beach Jello Wrestling 2024. Local vendors, live music, and wrestlers drink free.
I'm sorry. A Jello wrestling event in Rockaway? Are you going to be wrestling?
No, I don't want to say it's mostly for girls, but I see online at least it tends to be girls. I'm sure guys do it too. I shouldn't say that, but
It tends to be girls
yeah,
that do
I think it's kind
Jello
of
wrestling. Same with mud wrestling. It's
yeah. But it always looks fun. I always see clips posted on social media every year, and I'm like, okay, and they got live music, they got people bands performing and what have you. So it's a good community event.
yeah. So are you going to participate?
No,
Okay, okay. Because
no,
usually these types of things, if a guy gets into the ring, it's usually, a girl and the girls and the guy in there and them taking him down and that type of thing, just to be funny type of situation.
oh yeah. I don't know, but are we segueing now into the Olympic discussion because it sounds like we're approaching that.
We can. Let's get into it. Let's get into it. I haven't been watching the Olympics
Right.
personally. I'm not Olympics are usually pretty boring to me anyway. Um, so I haven't been watching it. Plus, watching Olympics here means you got to be up at like midnight, 1 a.m. To
Gotcha.
to catch it.
Oh, but
And
they clips on YouTube and whatnot, right?
yeah, get some clips on YouTube. I'm not really paying much attention as much. Of course, the controversies I've seen some of the stuff with the Japan uh athletes. Um, you know, I'm not really, like I said, I'm not really into it. Plus, I think there's just there is also the issue with Israel competing while they're currently doing what they're doing. And so it's just, yeah, not really a big thing for me.
Did you see the Turkish shooter who went viral?
Absolutely saw it. Yeah, he's everywhere.
Yeah, yeah,
Like everyone's wearing like these like mechanical things on their eyes, and like dude just seems like he's just chilling. Like,
right, right. Another day at the office,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and took the silver medal. So yeah, yeah.
But they're saying that but he took up sharpshooting recently, only a couple of years ago or something like that. But he's also prior military.
Makes sense.
If I, yeah,
Okay. Well, what everyone is talking about, at least has been for the past several days now, has been this boxing event featuring a boxer from Italy, right, against a boxer from Algeria. And the
mm,
Italian boxer, young lady, quit the match after what 36 seconds, something like that, after being hit a few times. And she said it wasn't fair.
right. She said she had never been hit that hard before or something like
Right,
that.
right. Sparked this whole big controversy with people posting these memes,
Right.
primarily saying "I'm with her." Have you seen that one? They say "I'm with her,"
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it's supposed to be a play on the Kamala memes, right, from when she got in the race. So it has become fodder for this culture war. I mean, that's really what it has become. Even if a lot of the claims out there aren't factually accurate. And so I put up a post asking people to please at least get your facts right if you're going to comment on this. And it doesn't mean I believe there are no discussions to be had. Quite the contrary. We're here to have that discussion. But let's just at least, let's start from a factual place. Let's not
Right.
spread, as I put it, misinformed hysteria, because a lot of people were saying that the Algerian boxer was transgender, and
Right.
it doesn't seem to be the case. Now, to be fair, there were articles saying that initially, at least, and maybe it was just an honest mistake originally that spiraled out of control, but it certainly became this other thing. It took on a life of its own, right?
Right. And
All of the
honest
data
mistake
seems to
or
suggest that this is a born girl, right? She was born a girl. In fact, there are pictures of her
female.
as a young girl online you could look at. It wasn't like it was a boy who was transgender, and some people making it seem like the person changed their gender just to fight in the Olympics against women, and that doesn't seem to be the case here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think you could say that, either it was a mistake in the beginning reporting that, or it was purposeful to further this culture war as
Maybe,
well.
although
By some places, not
right,
all
if
places.
I'm not mistaken, some of the sources weren't right wing sort. Like some of them seem to be pretty legit that were reporting that.
Okay.
I think they just got wrong information. Maybe they got it from the right wing media. I don't know, but
Right.
it's in some of those articles, because I saw some of the discussions online where if someone would call someone out for saying that, they would respond back like, okay, so you have articles saying that she isn't transgender, but what about these saying that she is? And there's a lot saying that she is, right?
Right.
So I get that, why there was confusion there. And also it seems to be a complicated issue. It seems like this boxer does have certain male traits or characteristics, right? High testosterone and apparently XY chromosomes, which are male chromosomes. And so that does
Does she
cause
have those?
a blurring of the lines. So that's been reported, right?
Okay.
So I think it's leading some to question whether she is trans, or even if she isn't transgender, if she should have been allowed to compete, right? Some are saying that, well, the bottom line is XY chromosomes mean you're a male. So, right, regardless of what the genitalia is or whatever, to them that defines male. And so there are interesting discussions to be had here, to be sure, about what are appropriate divisions in sporting events, right? What does define male and female for these purposes? I mean, so I think we can have those conversations, but again, let's just not spread untruths.
Right. And I think that's what's important, is to at least get the correct information out there. And part of that is the danger of trying to be first when breaking news, is like they don't really fully vet the information they get, or they have that potential to really be wrong from the get-go, which, if you are, can then taint the conversation afterwards, because some people will never hear the correction. They will only hear what they heard first.
Right. And that seems to be what was happening here, where people didn't want to acknowledge that maybe the information that they had wasn't exactly accurate, right? And then people sometimes change the goalposts, right?
Right.
They make a claim that's false, right? Let's say they say this person was born male, and that comes out to be false. Then sometimes, instead of acknowledging that what they said, what they was told was false, they will just try to change the subject, or just pivot or deflect, right? And they'll say, "Oh, but you mean to tell me that the person with XY chromosomes should be allowed to fight?" Like, no, that's a different conversation. But let's at least get to that starting point where
Right.
we could do the same set of facts, and then we could argue opinions.
Right. And I believe that the tests that people are talking about in regards to this Algerian boxer, and there's a Taiwanese boxer as well, the tests come from that international boxing organization, which the IOC says is a discredited organization. So
some of the comments here I wanted to get into, that's one of them on my Facebook, right? David says the IBA is corrupt and run by Russia, and it's
Right.
able to take what they say as real or not. I'd even go a step further and say most Olympic athletes are generic freaks. Okay, well, I think you mean genetic. That's a different discussion as well. They bring up Michael Phelps producing half the lactic acid as a normal human. Same with Ducky, a woman who has lost 9 matches and has been bested by the Irish multiple times. Oh, that's the Algerian boxer. So what they're saying is that, well, a couple of things, right? They made your point here about the IBA being corrupt, but also that, listen, it isn't just this particular athlete. To get into the Olympics, you usually have to be some kind of freak of nature, right? And so is
Mm.
this just the norm?
Right. Yeah, I think, you know, I don't know much about it. They say IBA has Russian ties and the corruption goes there. I know the IOC, the Olympic Organ Committee, they pulled their credit from whatever they did for the IOC prior and saying that they're discredited. And so who knows with those tests could all be biased. Who knows if those are even real, the chromosome argument or whatever it is. I don't know if there were any tests done after that by IOC. I don't know who they use now to do these types of things. Um, so I think, yeah, like you said, we've got to start from a position of facts. As it is right now, they passed eligibility by the IOC. So, that is what it is.
So Brad here in the comments says XY chromosome categorizes as male. I
Mm,
searched and searched to find multiple sources on the list. The National Library of Medicine, which is about as far away from the right side as an agency can get, clearly states just that. They have
right.
not revealed the boxer's testosterone levels and they won't due to privacy. So the argument here is that XY equals male, but it's unclear whether the belief is that this was someone born with male genitalia or if that's irrelevant, right? When they say
Right.
they have XY chromosomes, therefore they're a boy, are they saying I don't believe the stories of them not being always a woman, or are they saying that the chromosomes here are all that should matter?
Right. Yeah, I think that's you know, it's definitely a touchy subject, but the chromosomes are usually what we use to determine male and female, right? Boy, girl, man, woman would
Right,
be a gender issue, and that would be a different conversation. But it's talking about the sexes. It's generally that the general understanding is that this is what determines male and female. Now,
right,
again, I don't know if this boxer has XY chromosomes. Again, that's coming off of IBA information, which could be incorrect, corrupt, whatever it may be.
right. And XY usually does mean male as far as sex, but it isn't always that binary, right?
Well,
There
it
are
could be,
people
she could
categorized
be,
as intersex, for example. I don't
right. She
believe
could be
that
intersex.
this boxer, as far as I understand, this boxer is ever identified as such, but there still could be something genetic in there that's not straight up, right? Where if you look at typical male characteristics and typical female characteristics, maybe there's a little from A, a little from B here. That does
Right.
happen sometimes, right?
Right.
So it could certainly be a matter of that, right? This is someone who does have some male qualities, even though is a biological woman.
Right. Yeah. And that's a biological thing at that point. If they're
Right.
intersex, this is not an I identify as one way or another. This is the actual genetic makeup of that
True.
person, from my
Although,
understanding.
yes, correct. That's biology as opposed to gender identity. However, I do see some reporting saying that this boxer has never identified as intersex. And so they do use that language there as well.
Right. So, yeah, I think, some of the reporting could be, I mean, they may say that person may realize that they're intersex or may not realize they're intersex. So if they were born biologically
Mhm.
intersex, but They have female genitalia.
Right.
They may not even know that
Yeah,
they're
right. 'Cause
intersex.
what does that even really mean, right? You're saying intersex, okay, but you were born a girl, as far as anyone could ever tell, as far as you could tell, you lived your whole life as a girl, and how do you even know what your chromosomes were, or if you have heightened testosterone levels as opposed, to other people? Maybe that would show up in certain areas in life, but it seems to be more like a sliding scale. At least with maybe not so much the chromosomes, but when as far as the testosterone is concerned, right? Some people maybe have more testosterone than others, but
Oh, they do. Yeah.
yeah,
People
you know what
do.
I mean. So
Actually,
is it a matter of just drawing a line somewhere and saying, well, if you have this much or above this amount, it's inappropriate for you to box women, or is it just a matter of, listen, some women have high testosterone levels, as long as it's not artificially, right? Like taking steroids might be considered cheating, but if it's a natural thing, I think it's a little bit of a different conversation.
yeah, yeah. And I think this is, um, two things. People do have different levels of testosterone.
Right.
A matter of fact, this is actually funny because it's something I was reading the other day that young males today have a significantly lower baseline of testosterone than males that were born in the year 2000. And they had a significantly lower baseline of testosterone than males born in the 80s and the 70s. There's been a significant drop in males in the United States of testosterone levels.
Is that related to what we're eating?
Well, there's speculation that it could be what we're eating. There could be different things in our food that are,
That's what
blocking
that's
certain
what I'm thinking. Right?
things.
Maybe there are fewer chemicals in the food because
Previously, there were fewer chemicals.
I'm saying
Yeah.
as time goes on, right, more and more people have lobbied for more natural foods, less processed. You talk about natural chickens and all that kind of stuff, right? That aren't pumped with the chemicals. So I'm wondering if that has something to do with it, where back in the day, everything we ate was just pumped full of chemicals.
Well, no, it's be the opposite. So back in the day, there were less chemicals. Now there's more chemicals.
Hasn't
There's
there been
more
a
treatment.
movement
There's more
recently?
processing.
I feel like there's been a movement to move away from that. You see all these
There
organic.
has been. Yeah, there has been. So I'm talking about on average
Yeah,
of males in the United States. So the average 20-year-old male has less testosterone
right.
than you would have had in your 20s.
But I'm saying, don't you think since the year 2000, there's been a movement away from more processed foods? I feel like when I grew
There
up,
has
everything
been.
everything was processed, and
There
in
has been as far as
recent years,
personal choice.
kids are yeah, people are a lot more people are eating more natural food recently.
Right. There has been as far as personal choice, but not as far as production. There's been some, but there's still a lot out there. So people are still eating these heavily processed types of foods. However, you go back in the 60s and 70s, and you go even further back. So you think about your grandparents and great grandparents' generation where the foods were less processed, less chemically infused, the whole chain. And so they would have had much higher testosterone levels. And if
Did
that's the
they though?
cause.
No. But so
Yes, yes,
they
they
did in the
did.
'60s. They had higher.
Yes,
You're saying every
yes.
generation loses testosterone.
That's been the case that we're seeing. So there's obviously something that we're doing in our modern life that is disrupting the testosterone in males. And we're a little bit off
Yeah.
subject, but the point is that there can be varying levels of testosterone.
Right.
Um,
Well, absolutely. This is
yeah.
an Algerian boxer we're talking about. Is it possible that what they're doing in Algeria is different from what goes on in Italy
I
and
don't think so.
parts
I
of the
think
world, as far as the
I,
food goes, and as far as the lifestyle?
I think what's different in this situation, and this is okay, of course my personal opinion, is that we know the majority of males and females on the planet fall into these specific categories that we kind of use in society, right? Men have this, and then there are some who are intersex, and those are a much smaller uh, amount of cases of people who come intersex.
Yeah.
I think what's happening is because of this culture war, especially in the United States, and now kind of spread to the rest of the world, people are just looking at that and blowing this up, right? So yes, we know that sometimes someone is born intersex. It happens. right? They're
But
using
also,
this to
is
latch on
that
to
a
push
sliding
their
scale,
agenda.
right? Is that a sliding scale? I mean, having high testosterone for a biological female, right? At what point does that become intersex? Or is it just
And I think intersex would
normal?
be, I think it's whatever they're, it's more of a biological argument. And again, neither one of us are
Right.
gen,
Medical
what, sex
doctors.
scientists or whatever biologists. But I'm just saying, from my understanding, that wouldn't be the same. Now, on the flip side, what is probably relevant in the discussion is that when someone does transition
Mhm.
to, as a trans person, if they're going to transition to a trans male, part of that treatment is ongoing increase testosterone
Right.
prescriptions.
Right.
So if that's the case, then it stands to reason logically that certain higher levels of testosterone would be even medically understood as something that's related to males, which we understand this, but there's a certain level at which it's like, okay,
That's
this
why,
is amount is what's going to bring about the features that you're looking for.
right. Well, that's why men tend to have a deeper voice than women, right?
Deeper voice, the fat distribution, muscle, amount of muscle,
Muscle mass.
this
Yeah.
muscle mass, right? And even mentally, it plays into mentally. I saw an interview with a trans man who had she transitioned to he and started taking the testosterone treatments and noted how much the difference in her mentality was, especially when it comes to sex and
Right.
those types of
Right.
feelings. The testosterone did it. So that all influences your mentality and psychology as well, which brings about how people start to think in different sexes
But what
because of
is the
different
relevance
hormones.
to this boxing match?
I'm sorry?
What is the relevance to this boxing match?
The relevance is just that this you're talking about the at what point is elevated testosterone the next sex,
Right.
right? And so my point is that when they're going to transition, they do elevate their testosterone
Sure.
to either appear as or to live as that other sex. So
But
maybe
okay,
if
right.
it's a natural level at that level in which they're taking the testosterone, maybe there's some kind of line there that you can see. Who knows?
Okay. Like the medical line that is drawn
Yeah,
from to try to make someone
maybe there is.
right align more with a certain sex. Um, Tommy here says to think we have to have conversations about this instead of saying male versus male, female versus female. It doesn't get more simpler than that.
It does. That's not as simple,
This guy
apparently.
identifies as a female, meanwhile, he still has the muscle structure as a male. I don't. Then he says he has to stop babying the subject of identifying these two identities, male and female. That's it, not I think I want to be. I'm really confused by this comment.
See,
So,
I think that's part of the confusion in the discussion is he's talking about gender at this point, about identifying as, but
yeah,
this is more about the sex, the biology of it.
yeah. But I'm confused as to what he's trying to argue. He says to think we have to have conversations about this instead of saying male versus male, female versus. So he seems to be suggesting that this boxer is male
Male. Yeah.
based on having the muscle structure of a male. Because Nick then responds, "Wait, are you saying muscle structure defines gender now?" Okay, and then Tommy responds back, "No, the genitalia that you're born with defines gender. However, are you telling me the muscle structure of a male isn't generally bigger and stronger than a female's?" So maybe what he's saying is that he doesn't believe that this boxer is a biological woman
That's what it
because of
sounds
the
like.
muscle structure being bigger.
That's what it sounds like.
Then he
Or at
goes
least
on to
that's
comment,
one factor why he doesn't believe that
right?
this boxer is male.
Goes on to comment, "Are you seriously defending the fact that he is not a male?" Okay, so
So he believes that this. Wait, are you seriously defending the fact that he is not so
I
he
know, kind of
believes
hard to
that he is
parse,
male? Yeah,
right?
he believes he's male.
He believes, yes, yes, that is what he seems
All
to
right,
believe.
he believes that he believes the boxer is male. He believes she is male.
Right. Martin
Yeah.
says exactly, Brad. Okay, did I read Brad's comment? What did Brad have to say? Oh, Brad was the one talking about the XY chromosomes are male, and that the National Library of Medicine confirms that. Okay, so Martin here agrees with that, and then goes on to say there's a man and a woman, not mostly woman. WTF? I don't have that PhD, but I can tell the difference between them. Okay, so he also seems to be suggesting this is a biological man.
Right. And I think there's, people are going to come out of the woodwork and take their sides for the argument that they already uh, stand by, right?
Right.
They don't have the facts. We don't know anything about it. The tests that we have are from discredited organization, and people are taking these types of stances.
Yeah, and also it's just sometimes hard to parse what their belief even is, right? If they say no, it's a man, but do you believe that, for example, the boxer has female genitalia? Are you saying that that doesn't matter? Are you saying that they're trans?
Right.
Are you saying that they're a man because of their muscle structure, because of their testosterone, or because of their chromosome? What is the argument, right? Sometimes it's hard to tell if all they're saying is that's a man, because it
Right.
seems like it is more complicated than that.
Right.
At least from you know everything that we're seeing, it seems that this is a biological woman, and maybe there are some male characteristics there that can be discussed, but it is
Right.
just a man.
Right. And the person seemed to contradict their own point there because if we're talking about if they did ha if they have if she has female genitalia, which was seems to be his point, like, oh yeah, men have this genitalia, women have this genitalia. If she has that genitalia, then she's a woman. But he's saying no, this is definitely a man. Well, that contradicts your point. She's got the genitalia you say women should have that defines exactly what the
Right.
woman is.
But that's why I think reading into it, there is skepticism there. I think what they're saying is that this actually is a biological man.
And doesn't have
In
that
terms of
genitalia
genitalia,
naturally.
right? Like basically it's a transgendered athlete or someone who just
Yeah.
is male pretending to be a woman to box. I think that's the flavor what some of these comments are driving at.
Right.
All right, so there's a
Yeah.
really interesting comment here. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
So this one comes from Christine. In fact, I responded to this one saying it was very thoughtful. She says there are people born with variations of XY genes. At birth, doctors classify the gender based on inside, as in if there is a uterus, etc., and genitalia, as sometimes with both, they surgically do the least and stand with that. I'm not sure what that sentence really means. And sometimes with both, they surgically do the least and stand with that.
Right.
What does that mean?
If there's a mix or if there's like intersex or something like that, sometimes a doctor might have to just determine which way to go. Like, are we going to make, we've got a mix here. Are we going to make this male or are we going to make this female presenting and then
Surgically
go with
do.
that? If they
Oh, so
do
they're
the
saying
least,
the
if,
least that to get them to one side or the other.
right.
Gotcha.
So yeah,
Okay, well, she goes on to say they do not use the chromosome XY because there are females born that can have a Y. It is very complicated because a person can have normal hormones in every way for female, yet have prominent, very testosterone, maybe she means very high testosterone, if born cis. This person in particular has all female parts and was therefore at birth determined female. This is not a choice of a person born with both. I think in sports, they should use size, weight, and maybe testosterone levels in determining who is a match for a fair fight. In wrestling, they have different levels, lightweight, heavyweight, etc. Obviously not an expert, but would spare so much controversy for the athletes. The Olympics should bring fair unity in sports, not all this division. Surely understand both sides. Now, if this was a trans male, will be another story. That's the
yeah, they
comment from
sound
Christine. So she seems to be acknowledging that there are complications here, and it is possible, as seems to be the case here, to have someone born a girl with XY chromosomes. It's not common, right? But it is out
right.
there. And she acknowledges this is a complicated story because this person can be female in every way or in most ways, I guess, but have certain aspects to them that aren't your
Right.
typical female. But is that grounds to disqualify someone from competition, right? And if so, where do you draw those lines? So she has some
Right.
ideas here. She's talking about like they have weight classes. Maybe they should have classes based on testosterone levels. You
Well,
know,
I think that's one of the reasons why they have the testosterone tests um, in these qualifications, right? To determine these testosterone levels. The question then becomes, at what level do you set that? Because you could have a completely biological woman who has elevated testosterone levels, and that would mean that she would fail the test, even though she is completely female.
and a couple of things can be going on there, right? Because when you have
Right.
the elevated testosterone levels, that could be a sign that you're injecting yourself with testosterone to get an
It
unfair.
could be, or it could be natural. I mean, it could be
Could be
natural.
natural, right?
Yeah.
Are we going to have divisions based on testosterone, or are we just going to say there's a cutoff? But would it be fair to put an athlete like this in the men's division? That's something that we're not talking about either. I mean, just because she
No.
has higher
Totally.
testosterone than most women, does that mean that she's suitable for boxing men?
Right. Yeah. I think one of the things that we do have to understand, and people might not like, is that sports operates off of a general baseline. The divisions are general baseline. We have the men's and the women's division in general, and then there are weight classes, within that. So there may be certain sports that people, if you have an intersex condition, maybe you don't fall into one of those categories,
Right.
and it's not for you, unfortunately. So that I don't know if that's talked about a lot. It's trying to
That
be
they may not
inclusive,
be
which is
eligible for
understanding.
either. You're saying that it's possible someone might not be eligible for either division.
Right, because these aren't hard and fat. These are more generals. Like, if you're this and that, you may not you may fall in that gray area. And
Yeah.
someone that's intersex does fall in a gray area between the sexes that we talk about,
Right.
right? That doesn't mean that they're not natural. It doesn't mean that they're not normal. That means that they're a rare minority, and they don't fall into the conditions that we generally talk about. And so that might be the case. So, for example, there are different things here, like, you know, um, airline seats are made for a certain average size human. Some people are going to be bigger than that, and you just might not fit in that seat. We can't change the whole society to make seats that's going to fit everybody, because we don't know who's going to fit in
Now,
those seats.
this reminds me of the discussion we had about the Equal Rights Amendment and how
Right,
expansive it was, right? And
right,
would bar discrimination on the basis of various factors, including
right,
gender identity, sex, right? Gender expression, so on and so
right,
forth. And so obviously athletes would be making the case if you were to tell them that they couldn't compete in any division, they would be
right.
discriminated against, and that would be unlawful.
Sure,
And then
sure.
there are people who are suggesting you should have separate divisions based on trans status, or maybe someone like
Right.
this belong to their own division of a biological woman with the chromosomes and the testosterone levels of a man or something like that. But do you really have enough people to make up a division like that? Let's be realistic.
Right. And then the question becomes, you know, part of the question becomes, those athletes are going to be excluded basically from the
Yeah.
the regular activities. And so how do you reconcile that? So,
Joanne comments it should be based on testosterone levels. The boxer suffers from Swyer syndrome,
right,
which is a rare disorder characterized by the failure of the sex glands to develop,
right,
classified as a disorder of sex development, DSD, which encompasses any disorder in which the chromosomal, gonadal, or anatomic sex development is abnormal.
right,
Girls with Swyer syndrome have an XY chromosomal makeup, as boys normally do, instead of an XX chromosomal makeup.
Right.
So,
But I think it's, I wonder if at some point you got to think, okay, well, unfortunately you fall through the cracks and this may not be something that you can participate in, or it's something that's going to be fair to others if you participate in.
but
I don't know.
is that fair to the athlete? I mean, we talked about
It's not really
Olympic athletes tending to be what they call genetic freaks in some way, right? Like Michael Phelps, they said doesn't
to
produce a lot
some
of
degree.
lactic acid, and that's
Right.
why they have these advantages. A lot of it is biological, right? Of course, you need to
Right.
train your ass off, and you don't just get gifted a gold medal. But some people are genetically predisposed to doing well
Right.
in sports, right? And
And that's the argument on the other side is that, if there's someone who has like this Algerian boxer, has these elevated levels and has this and is a woman and but has a just kind of a genetic anomaly for women, why would you deny them? They're still women. Shaq isn't pulled out of NBA because he's much more massive than everybody else.
right.
It's like, wow, well, you know, this is a different level of male, but we want to get that on the
Right. And
team.
that's a good point. I think people are maybe more emotional about this one because it's boxing, right? So it involves physical combat. If you
Right.
had, right, let's say this was not a boxer, but a basketball player, I don't know if the outrage would be quite as loud.
I don't think so. I don't think so at all.
Yeah.
Now, if it was an intersex, well, let me see. Hold on a second. You know what? If this Algerian boxer was on the women's basketball team and dominating, the outrage would be as loud.
As loud. I mean, I can see there still
Yeah.
being outrage, but I think
Yeah,
they're
no, it would.
more emotional about it because it's boxing. Because
But
you
given
have
the
the
culture
imagery.
war right now, I think it
I
would
know,
be as
but this just I think really pushed it because you have the imagery of the woman
yeah,
taking a knee, crying, whatever it is. She's in the ring, and then it's like, oh, this is what the liberals are up to now. They're letting
right.
men beat the crap out of women. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think it has more of that flavor to it because it's boxing. But I agree, there could be other scenarios that would generate outrage.
Yeah, and so I think it's not an easy issue. It's not an uncomplicated issue.
Right?
And a lot of the arguments will say they'll bring up things like Michael Phelps,
Yeah.
Shaq, these are insanely big guys. Like there was a kid that's a teenager and he was like already 7 feet tall, but he's out there playing basketball with the rest of his class, and everyone there is still in their less than 6 feet, and they're like, this is really unfair. But he is that age, and so he should be eligible. And
Yeah.
it's like, where do you draw that line? Do you say, okay, you're just too tall, you can't play here? But we do it on the flip, though. We do on the flip. Imagine that there's no chance a little person would make it in the NBA. It's
But
just
they
not possible.
Right, but that's not discriminating against them. It's just they wouldn't have the skills to compete at that level. I mean, if they were great, you had Muggsy Bogues, you know what I mean? If you
Yeah, but
were
he was
great,
like 5 feet, right?
right, but I'm saying normally you wouldn't because
Right.
the ball players would be able to block you and right, and we just wouldn't be
Right.
able to compete with them. But if you had someone who could, they would be able to.
Yeah, but realistically, you'd probably would never
That's just
see it.
because they're not as good at the sport. That's not because you're discriminating against them.
Well, they have limitations that might prevent them from being better. The ball's much
Right,
bigger to them ratio wise, and so they might not
right.
be able to do the same types of tricks there. It's
You're
going to
not
take more for them to
yes,
take that shot because it's 13 feet up.
right.
It's
So you're
going to
not
be
artificially imposing a limitation on their ability to compete. They just physically tend not to be able to compete at that level.
Yeah. And so, at some point they might have to just acknowledge that, look, you know, this is what I am, and this sport at this level is not for me.
Right.
So
But again, I think there's a difference.
it is a difference in that regard.
Yeah, if it's someone who is great at the sport, but you're saying they just aren't allowed because it wouldn't be fair.
They're too great.
Yeah, you're just too good, but you're going to dominate
Right.
versus you just aren't good enough to get in. I mean, those are two different stories.
Yeah, but you're not good enough to get in. It, it's not only just that you're not good enough to get in, it's also based on kind of your biological makeup. You're restricted by your biological
Yeah,
makeup
the bottom
because the
line is you can't
average,
play that sport well. That's the bottom line.
yeah,
So
but it's also because, so yeah, you know, it's a complicated issue. Um,
yeah, I think that's really the main takeaway here, and it really isn't as binary, as black and white, as male or female, right? As some people have presented it. And it is interesting when you look at the culture war broadly around this
right.
issue and how even in some of the comments, they're like, it's very simple, penis equals
It's
boy, vagina equals girl. But it seems like you have a case of someone who is and always was a girl and a woman, but who has some male traits. What do you do with
yeah,
that, right? So I think that in itself emphasizes this idea that it isn't always as
right,
simplistic as is presented by some.
right, right.
Barbara
And
here is
yeah,
saying, "Oh, what's up, Barbara?" She came to remember Barbara. She came to our show from Florida, I think it was.
yep, yep.
She said, from what I've read, she was assigned female at birth by the birthing doctor based on having female genitalia. So she has grown up as a female, knowing nothing else. She has been boxing since she is 5 as a female and ranked 17th in the female category in some division. She was beaten by a female boxer from Ireland for the world championship last year and has been beaten 9 times at that level by females. She does have the XY chromosomes and high levels of testosterone, but that doesn't seem to be a great advantage here since she has been beaten by 9 different females.
That's another argument as well. Yeah. I
Right.
mean,
So
sh-
that's something to consider, right? Because if people are going to make the argument that it's just fundamentally unfair for her to compete against women, well, you would think she would be dominating every woman, but that's not the case.
that's not the case. So
Yeah.
my question would be, do you think like the Italian boxer quit because she said she'd never been hit that hard in her life? Um, what if it was one of those women that beat this Algerian boxer, punched her in the face like that? I would assume they hit pretty hard as well. Maybe she's just got hit by something that's, and shook her and she just
Right.
wasn't
Although
ready for that.
to be fair, you could be the hardest hitting boxer and still lose, right? Just because someone beat her doesn't mean that they hit harder than she does. They
That's true. That's
So
true.
Floyd Mayweather, for example, right? He won
Yeah.
his matches with finesse. He wasn't really delivering
Right.
that knockout punch, but he
Right.
was very technical and landing more punches and evading his opponent's punches. And so
Yeah.
it could be a matter of that as well. Even Mike Tyson, by the way, I saw an interview with him where everyone always talked about his knockout power, right? In his
Right.
prime, he had that knockout punch to fight to end so quickly. And someone said to him, "How did you get that strong, right? To deliver that knockout punch with such power?" And he said, actually, it wasn't about power. It was about precision. It was about landing the punch in the right spot to get the result.
Yeah.
A
And
lot
it
of people don't take that into account when looking at boxing.
right. And it could have been part of that too. This
Yeah,
Algerian boxer could have just hit that button correctly
yeah,
and that freaked her out. Like Tyson's famous saying, you bring up Tyson, is that everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
right.
And, she could have just had that realization like, oh, this is a different game. I don't want any parts of this. So,
Chris here says, here's the problem. We are so worried about inclusion that we ignore common sense. We are literally splitting hairs as to how this person was born, male/female, XY chromosomes, testosterone levels, past disqualifications, et cetera, et cetera. I'm all for inclusion, he says, but not if it jeopardizes fundamental fairness in an event. Sorry, you were born different. You can't fight women, he says. So I think you were making a similar type point or suggesting that could be a way of looking at this, that
right.
maybe you were born female with XY chromosomes and high testosterone, whatever the case may be. There's perhaps merit in this idea that it would be unfair. And again, based on the record, maybe not in this particular case, but
Right.
it could be right. There could be room to concede that in some cases, maybe it would be unfair to allow someone, even who is a biological woman, to compete against women based on other biological factors.
Right. So, I mean, for example, and it's, and we've seen cases, but I can't think of any specific names, but imagine someone Shaq's size um, playing football in the, elementary school age league. If they're like, 6'5", 7 feet, 300 pounds at like age 12, you might not want your kids on the football field with them at age 12 because of the potential for the damage they could cause
Right.
because everyone around them is, you know, nowhere near that. It's like putting an adult on that field, body weight size or body size, muscular mass size.
Yeah.
And you might have to say, look, I'm sorry, look, your kid, we don't want to discriminate against him, but everyone else could really get hurt with your kid out there. And so, you know, you might have to wait until high school,
Right.
you know.
Although there also may be a difference between kids in school competing and athletes in the Olympics competing, right? Because when it comes to the Olympics, I think you do want to be able to have the best in the
Oh,
world,
absolutely. Absolutely.
right? And so, I
Absolutely.
think there may be some pushback with the idea that if you're just too good, we're not going to let you in the Olympics, right?
Right. For the Olympics, I don't think that applies. I mean, the idea to get there, people that get there are too good. Like
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
supposedly the best of the
Right,
best in the world.
right.
You
So,
know.
okay. I mean, there are so many good comments here, honestly, and I wanted to give them a light on this episode because I didn't get into it with everyone on Facebook, but I think this is a good opportunity to do it. I think a lot of the comments here are thoughtful, right? There are some ignorant things being said, but
Hmm.
there are people who are acknowledging the complexity of the issue and having a respectful discussion. Paul,
Right.
I think leaves a good comment here. He says, "Sad, but this is the way of the world we live in now. Make everything pseudo-political, start a culture war with lies and misstatements, and rile people up like the mob of torch-carrying lunatics in Frankenstein. These are scary, scary times. This is an issue of fairness in sport, and this has nothing to do with gender equality. That she was born a woman with an XY chromosome, well, that complicates things. The IOC will eventually have to add a different division for people who have transitioned. It simply isn't fair for a woman to have to face someone with the strength of a male, particularly in boxing or other sports that require physical contact." So he's
But
really, I think, giving this due thought and saying,
I
look,
think I
this is
don't know.
not a gender equality issue.
I don't know. Like that you can hear in some of the way that he wrote his comment. This wasn't a person that transitioned. This is a person that was born female.
Right.
So it's not that's not the same point there. Um,
That's what he says. Yeah.
but didn't he say that about he was talking about a person that transitioned?
No. He's that's a different example. He kind of went off on a tangent there, but he said
Right.
this is an issue of fairness in sport, and this has nothing to do with gender equality.
Right.
She was a woman with an XY chromosome. Well, that complicates things. And then he talked about the IOC having to add a different division for people who have transitioned. So that's, I think, a bit of a tangent he's going on. But
Right.
in this particular case, it isn't that story, but it's a
Right.
little complicated because of the XY chromosomes and the testosterone.
Right. Yeah. So I think yeah.
So,
So
on the other hand, you have Paul saying, seriously, this is a different Paul, by the way. Seriously, that's a dude, man. Come on. And if you think the same thing wouldn't happen in the US, you're crazy. It's been happening for years now. So I also made the point in my post that a lot of people are saying things like, well, what's happening in this country is a disgrace. And I'm saying,
right.
to do with the US. This is happening at the Olympics in Paris between an Italian boxer and an Algerian boxer. So
Right.
let's stop acting like the US. Joe Biden himself made this happen. People are making that kind of argument.
People
But
made the argument that it was Kamala Harris's fault.
right, right. And of
Yeah.
course, Trump is on TV saying it wouldn't happen if I was president. So and that's all.
Right. It's like, no, this is in a different country in Paris
Yeah.
between a boxer from Algeria and one from Italy. Like has absolutely nothing to do with US politics or US culture wars. It's just the way that they're seeing it and they're wanting to latch on to the argument that fits the argument that they align with. So yeah,
Harry here says, well, then please define what a man is. XY equals man per science. So
mm,
again, are you taking the stance that an XY chromosome means you're male and always must be in the men's division, regardless of all other factors, right? Or are you saying that you don't believe this is a biological woman and the chromosome is your proof?
right. So yeah, it's again a lot of there's a lot of layers to it. Um, the point is that, or not the point. What it comes down to though is that something will need to be dealt with, whether it's a case by case basis, when it comes to sport, especially sport that involves fighting,
Right.
physical fighting, because of the possibility of people getting uh, mortally wounded.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think there needs to be a clear set of rules that we're going to.
well, I don't know if it can be if we're talking about there's a scale and there's possibilities, there's maybe abnormalities,
That's
there's
why you make the
rarities.
rules. That's
You
why
got
you
to
make.
do it maybe case by case in some
Can't be
places,
case by
maybe.
case. Well, you have to evaluate each athlete according to several factors, I think. But I think
Right.
there needs to be rules in place taking all those factors into account. So, for example, when it comes to the testosterone levels, maybe when it comes to the chromosomes, maybe there's a point scale that you assign to each factor. I mean, there's got to be some way to do it that's
Right.
consistent. So it doesn't matter
Right.
just picking and choosing whom you want.
Right. Yeah, right. Or there's that, or the other option, which probably people, some people might not like, is to just be like, okay, well, look, intersex can't participate in this type of in this league. It's just not,
Right. Or the third option is if you're biologically male, you're allowed to be in the men's division and vice versa, regardless of the testosterone, the chromosomes, or other factors,
right,
you know?
right,
And then, of course, we didn't even get to people's thoughts of should divisions be only based on biology, or what if you are trans, right? To what extent should
right,
trans athletes be allowed to be in the divisions that they identify with?
right,
So
right,
that's a whole different discussion, right? And again, that's why I say this really is a complicated issue. And I applaud those who treat it with the complexity that it warrants. But for those trying to boil this down to this is about trans athletes trying to game the system, and B, this is the US's faults and not an international issue. You get the rubber chicken of the week.
Oh, the rubber chicken is back.
That's right.
Yeah, you got
The
to
rubber
squeeze it
chicken.
for good measure. You didn't squeeze it and make the noise for good measure.
Oh yeah, it doesn't make it does. I got to make the noise. So yeah, it's just
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
so I know we went a little bit long on that, but we had a lot of good discussion there and comments to go over.
Yeah.
I do want to put the poll question out for the people on this topic. So the poll question of the week is: do you believe Algerian boxer Imane Khelif should have been banned from boxing women? I think that's how you say the name, Imane Khelif or Khalif. I'm not
You
sure.
got me. They'll just have to forgive the mispronunciation.
Yes. All right.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, we had a poll from last week, right?
We did have a poll from last week, and we were talking about Biden's suggestion or his proposal that the Supreme Court justices should be limited to serving 18 years. And so our question was to that effect, do you believe Supreme Court justices should be limited to serving 18 years? And we had quite a number of votes. We have finally got a bounce back
Okay. Shadow
from
ban is over.
it's possible. It's possible. We did a good number of votes here. Um, and so we had 87% said yes, they believe they should be limited. 6% said no, and 8% I'm not sure.
Okay.
So that's an overwhelming majority.
Yeah.
One of the first comment on here is saying that they would argue for even less, but 18 is a good number to begin the conversation with.
Right. So kind of consistent, I think, what consistent with what we thought might happen, which is that people overwhelmingly would agree with this idea of term limits for Supreme Court justices, and probably for all elected officials and politicians and judges and anyone for that matter, right?
Mm, you're right. Let's see. One person put here, I haven't read the comment, but let me see. Another thing that could help is to place each justice on the ballot every 4 years with the simple question if that justice should be retained in office for 4 more years. That's another thing to think about. Interesting.
The thing is, now you're really injecting politics into the mix. We're supposed to
It's
have a system of checks and balances, right? Where
right,
the judicial branch is a check against potential abuse of
right,
the other branches. I mean, the Constitution itself was written as an anti-democratic document. The rights that we have in the
right,
Constitution are meant to protect us against corrupt majorities, right?
right,
Uh, the way our system is set up, yes, we elect people into these positions, but their power isn't supposed to be unlimited. There are certain things even majorities aren't supposed to be able to do. And so that's why you have courts. That's why you have the judicial branch to push back against that where needed. So to say
mm.
that the judges are going to be subject to the will of the voters, I think that undoes our whole setup of trying to protect against corrupt majorities.
Yeah. Um, it seems like, I'm seeing a lot
Undoes?
of,
Did I
I'm
say
sorry.
undoes? I meant undoes. I said undoes. Undoes. Yeah. Go ahead.
It seemed like there's a little bit of a debate in the comments as far as how long. Some are saying 18 is way too long. It should be even shorter. Some are saying, we had the question last time, why 18? Um, some are saying 20 should be it.
Yeah.
Some are
Yeah.
saying 15 or less.
Right. Right. I mean, we don't know exactly why they came up with 18. It would be interesting to figure out why they chose 18 as opposed to any other number. But I think we had some ideas last week. Number one, you might not want to do it in increments of four because of the
Right.
presidential election every 4 years. And you also don't want to have too short of a term because you don't want constant turnover in the courts. You do want to have some stability in our constitutional framework and in our law.
Right. Right. Um, I even mentioned that in the write-up that went along with the poll that there's a potential for that instability if there's every 18 years or whatnot. It's also to me, people talk about this term limits. People also talk about expanding the court. They're mentioning that there's expand the court to 13 judges. I don't think that solves the problem as much as people think it does. So, for example, term limits, so they have 18 years. Again, we brought up, that could make it a little bit more political. Um, it could tie it more to the parties and more to the elections. It's expanding the court to 13 doesn't really matter if you still have the same percentage bias like the court has now. And it might even make it more difficult to balance that out because there's so many more justices that could be in that imbalanced realm. I think the biggest thing that would make a factor is what we need is Biden's other suggestion as far as an ethical standard, an ethical barrier, which we already assume that they have, but what do we do when there's a failure in that regard? And that's what we're seeing now. I think there's an ethical and an integrity failure on the Supreme Court, which is what the real problem is, that term limits isn't going to change, right?
Right.
And how to address when there is that failure. How
Right.
do we
Right.
rectify that? That I think is the bigger issue and the one that will be more effective.
Because if you take out one rubber chicken and replace it with another rubber chicken, you still got a rubber chicken.
Right. So there has to be, you know, I think to me, those are like the buzzwords everyone's talking about, but I
Mhm.
think it's the integrity issue
Yeah.
because Supreme Court is supposed to be unbiased. There's supposed to be that statue of Lady Justice with the blindfold on, right? That's what we rely on them for. And it's clearly obvious that we have a number of justices right now who don't fit that role. And so their integrity and their ethics have been compromised. And how do we deal with a court that has compromised justices on it?
Right.
That is what we should deal with.
Right. Well said. And with that, I think it's time for the bottom line.
Why wasn't that the bottom line?
Oh, okay.
Let's
The
let's
bottom
make that the bottom line.
line. I was
Um,
Okay, yeah.
Unless you got, no, go ahead. If you have something to add, go for it.
I was thinking, well, relating back to our discussion earlier, that we can have our own opinions, but we can't have our own facts, right? And so before we have these discussions on any polarizing or controversial issue, we should at least try to enter the discussion with a fundamental understanding of what's actually happening before we then insert our own opinions and values, right? Let's not try to pigeonhole what we want the narrative to be. It's like that square peg in the round hole, right? Let's not try to force our opinions into something that isn't actually happening here. Let's actually start with the correct set of facts and go from there.
Well said, well said. One
And
conversation we did not get to have, which is the big news as far as Kamala Harris choosing her VP, which was kind of a surprising pick, because we were talking about, I think in the in chat we were talking about she was going to announce in Philly, and was like it'd be kind of crazy if she announced someone else in that town.
right.
Um,
Right. Yeah, no, that
so
was a whole crazy thing. Apparently, the senator who doesn't want to wear the suit, Fetterman, sabotaged Shapiro. I guess they never got along in Pennsylvania. There's like a competition there. And so he sent a memo into Harris's campaign saying that he would put ambition above loyalty. You shouldn't pick him. And I think really hurt his chances. So
mm, oh,
we'll see if that move pays off. So Walz gave a good speech earlier. We'll see what happens from here. One
right.
thing, I know we were going to wrap up, but the only thing I wanted to mention this week on that topic is you got to look at these polls, not just what the overall poll is telling you, not just the headline of who's winning or whatever, but look at the crosstabs. Look at how the demographics are breaking down, because the latest poll I saw today had Harris up over Trump nationally by a few points. I think it was 3 points.
Mhm.
But if you go into the demographics, it still has Trump winning the under 35 vote by a few
Mm,
points. That just doesn't make any sense to me. And so I'm starting
mm,
to question whether her lead is actually bigger than these polls are showing, right? Because why should Trump be winning the under 35 vote? I don't think he is. Again,
right,
in the midterms 2 years ago, I believe the under 35 went Democratic by over 20 points. So there's no way
right.
it's swaying all the way to Trump.
Yeah,
Something is going on. I think that you're not getting accurate polling data when you're
right,
polling kids. And
right.
the models, I think they should be adjusted. I think something needs to be figured out with that, because I don't think you're really getting the real data there.
Right, right, right. Well, from what I'm seeing, just briefly, it seems like people are kind of okay with the pick that she's chosen. He seems to be quite progressive. The people are listing a lot of accomplishments and things that he's done in his state that align with what the party and a lot of the voters want. And so, you know, something about him that looks a little weird, but we can,
Yeah, well, the thing
he
is,
looks familiar. He looks familiar like a
he looks like
character.
Joe Biden. The thing is this:
Well,
if
kind of, but a character. He looks like some kind of a character from maybe a movie or something. I can't quite place it.
if JD Vance is the Sarah Palin of Dan Quayle's, Tim Walz is the Joe Biden of Joe Biden's. So
Okay.
does that kind of make sense? Uh, I have my concerns about that aspect of it. And you're trying to win a general election here. Do you want to go with the progressive pick? I don't know. I don't know why that's seen as uh, an asset when you're trying to win swing moderate voters in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I think perhaps
We'll
the
see.
general election has become more difficult by this pick, but we got what we got, and we're going to go where we're going to go. So we'll see what
Right.
happens.
All right. Sounds good. So, well, you can find us on YouTube at Nuance Show, as well as on Instagram and everywhere podcasts are available. Subscribe, download, listen, follow, comment, argue, but do it in good faith and with nuance.
That's right. Bring Raucous back August 23rd. We've got work to do. Catch you next week.